It began not with thunder, nor with a blinding flash across the heavens, but with something almost insulting in its quietness. A single, fragile blip, a whisper of motion against the eternal black. Had our instruments been a fraction less sensitive, the universe would have kept its secret. Yet there it was, an anomaly sliding with such precision it mocked the very chaos of space itself. At first, scientists dismissed it as routine. A comet, perhaps an asteroid, the kind of thing the cosmos tosses our way every few decades. But this was different. The shape was wrong. Too perfect. Too deliberate. Its silence wasn't the silence of emptiness. It was the silence of control. The kind that hums not with randomness, but with intention. And as we studied it, that intention became undeniable. The memory of Oumuamua returned like a ghost. The cigar-shaped shard that once darted through our solar system, leaving behind speculation, debate, and dread. But what we were staring at now was no mere shard. It was bigger, slower, more deliberate. It was as if Oumuamua had been a question. And this was the answer. The James Webb Space Telescope, humanity's most powerful eye into the abyss, locked onto the object and peeled back its disguise. What it revealed was not an interstellar rock, not a wandering relic, but a precision-built enigma whose every move spoke of intelligence. Too calculated to drift, too efficient to be a chance, too aware to be ignored. The discovery should have been a triumph. Instead, it felt like a sentence. For with each passing scan, the truth pressed harder against our fragile sense of safety. We were not looking at a visitor. We were staring at something waiting, something alive, something that had noticed us. From the moment its trajectory was mapped, 3 Atlas shattered every rule of celestial mechanics. Objects that wander in from the abyss do not behave politely. They streak through at impossible speeds, tearing across the solar system in violent arcs before vanishing forever into the dark. But this thing, it did not rush. It glided. It coasted with a grace that mocked gravity itself, as though space were not a battlefield of forces, but a road it had memorized long ago. Its path was surgical. It skimmed past planets with impossible precision, pulling just enough gravitational slingshot to conserve energy. Like a seasoned traveler who already knew every turn, every shortcut, every hazard. No comet, no asteroid, no rogue fragment could ever weave through the minefield of debris fields, solar flares, and radiation belts with such elegance. Its journey wasn't just unlikely. It was statistically impossible unless something or someone was guiding it. Astronomers retraced its origin, running back the clock through equations and star maps. What they found was more chilling than the object itself. The route wasn't random. It wasn't natural. It was intentional, threaded through obstacles like a chess master executing a strategy 10 moves ahead. Every close pass, every angle of approach, seemed to have been decided long before our telescopes were ever built. To watch its motion was to feel small, like ants watching a god's hand hover above the sand. This wasn't the brute momentum of a rock adrift. This was choreography. It danced where it wanted to dance, stopped where it wanted to stop, and waited as if it already knew we'd be watching. And then the thought none of them wanted to voice crept into the room. If it knows the game better than we do, then who exactly is playing against us? When James Webb turned its piercing gaze upon 3 Atlas, the silence of space was broken, not by sound, but by patterns. First came the heat signatures. Ordinary interstellar debris burns unpredictably, flashing and fading as ice evaporates under sunlight. But this object did not flinch, did not flare. Instead, it pulsed. Not randomly, not chaotically, but with rhythm. A measured heartbeat, each emission spaced like a signal, as though the void itself was being used as a carrier wave. Then came the materials analysis. Webb's instruments revealed compounds that should not exist in nature, hyper-reflective surfaces engineered to perfection, dense internal lattices suggesting not stone or metal, but hollow chambers. A machine's skeleton, not a comet's core. And from those depths, the telescope captured something stranger still. A faint electromagnetic anomaly. A frequency that whispered every 147 seconds. It was steady, deliberate, almost familiar. Cross-referencing the data, scientists felt their blood run cold. The same frequency had once been detected in Oumuamua, only for a single fleeting moment, just before it disappeared into the black. Back then, it was dismissed as interference, a glitch, a cosmic coincidence. But now the signal was louder, cleaner, and intentional. The connection was undeniable. It was no longer possible to pretend this was a chance. Two interstellar visitors, separated by years, carrying the same hidden code. One brief, almost shy, the other bold and repeating like a beacon. It was as though Oumuamua had whispered a greeting, and 3 Atlas had returned with a conversation. But conversations demand two sides. The signal wasn't only a pattern, it was an invitation, or a warning, or both. And the most haunting question was not whether it was speaking. It was whether we were already answering. Oumuamua had come and gone like a phantom. No tail, no propulsion, no explanation for its sudden acceleration. It tumbled end over end, cigar-shaped and alien in every sense of the word. Theories clashed. Some whispered alien probe. Others insisted on physics we didn't yet understand. But before the debate could mature, it vanished, leaving only questions. And then came 3 Atlas. Larger, slower, more deliberate. It didn't tumble, it coasted. It didn't accelerate mysteriously. It glided with terrifying precision. It wasn't simply passing through. It lingered as if to say, I am not a mistake. I am not an accident. For some, the comparison was obvious. Oumuamua was reconnaissance, a scout, a quiet observer testing the waters of our solar system. But 3 Atlas? It was something else entirely. This was no passive shard drifting through gravity's grip. This was interactive, pulsed when we looked at it. It shifted when we tracked it. It watched us as we watched it. And if Oumuamua was the radar ping, then 3 Atlas was the drone. The escalation was undeniable. First a whisper, then a voice. First an eye, then a presence. Each step deliberate, each encounter more intimate than the last. It was not just probing space, it was probing us. Behind closed doors, scientists and defense analysts began to whisper the same question, though few dared speak it aloud. If this is phase 2, what is phase 3? If the scout has passed and the watcher has arrived, then what or who is coming next? The cosmos was no longer silent. It had stages, a rhythm, a plan. And for the first time, humanity realized that we might not be spectators in this story at all. We might be the subject. Official channels remained calm, their statements sterilized with the cold language of science. Unusual interstellar objects, anomalous readings, further study required. But outside the walls of government agencies, fear grew raw. Independent researchers, astronomers with backyard observatories, data scientists armed with code, cryptographers trained to spot hidden languages, were not bound by protocol. They saw the truth unfiltered, and what they found rattled even the most skeptical minds. Inside 3 Atlas, Webb's readings revealed something almost unthinkable. The structure wasn't random, nor merely engineered for durability. At 2:13 a.m., telescopes recorded what no model predicted. A subtle but unmistakable redirection. Not a glitch, not a wobble, but a course correction. The object veered with a precision no natural body could mimic, aligning itself not with random drift but with Earth's orbital plane. Gravity could not explain it. Solar winds could not explain it. There was only one word that fit, and it landed in every control room like a curse. Decision. The effect was immediate. NASA, ESA, and private think tanks convened in emergency midnight calls. Analysts rewound the data again and again, hoping to find error, noise, anything to restore their comfort. But the truth was inescapable. The object had not just moved, it had responded. To us, or to something else. In the halls of the Deep Space Network, silence fell heavier than words. If Oumuamua was a passive eye, then 3 Atlas was no longer simply watching. It was maneuvering. It was choosing. And that choice was not random. It was surgical. It had tilted its attention toward us. For the first time, humanity was not gazing into the abyss as passive observers. The abyss had turned its gaze back, steady and unblinking. And somewhere in that shift, the fragile line between curiosity and fear snapped. There was no visitor passing by. This was an arrival. As 3 Atlas drew closer, its silence began to fracture. The electromagnetic pulses it emitted were no longer static, no longer uniform. They shifted, reshaped, reacting to their environment. Subtle flickers when near planetary orbits, faint distortions when Earth's own radio chatter touched the void. It was not broadcasting blindly. It was listening, and it was answering. A group of cryptographers and data scientists, working outside official channels, pushed the patterns through neural networks trained on thousands of languages, codes, and cosmic signals. What they found was not a message in words, but in ratios. Prime number spirals, the Fibonacci sequence, the golden ratio, patterns that do not belong to one culture or one species, but to existence itself. The same ratios that shape the growth of shells, the branching of trees, the spirals of galaxies, even the coiling of DNA. At first, some dismissed it as coincidence. But the signal changed. It adapted over time, like a mind probing for resonance, aligning itself with our mathematical heartbeat. And then came the moment that silenced every skeptic. When the James Webb Telescope first locked onto 3 Atlas in the infrared spectrum, the pulses shifted. For 3 minutes, the pattern broke, only to resume again, altered, refined, as if acknowledging the gaze. Felt like we were watching. We were not decoding a signal. We were caught inside one. A living rhythm, ancient and universal, that spoke not to ears or eyes, but to the fundamental architecture of reality. A message older than speech, etched into the geometry of life itself. 3 Atlas was not simply showing us it existed. It was showing us it understood us. If the signals were unnerving, the chemical signatures were terrifying. James Webb's spectrography revealed faint traces clinging to the outer shell of 3 Atlas, complex carbon molecules, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. To the untrained eye, they were meaningless, but to biologists, they were unmistakable. These were not random chemicals scattered by the chaos of space. These were the building blocks of life itself. On comets and asteroids, such compounds appear in chaotic mixtures, primitive and raw. But here they were pure, perfectly structured, as though refined, cultivated, prepared. Not the scatter of chance, but the product of intent. The whispers began immediately. What if 3 Atlas was not merely a probe or machine? What if it was a seed ship, an ark of prebiotic chemistry, designed not to observe but to plant, to carry the origins of life across the stars, waiting for fertile ground? Suddenly, Earth's role shifted from observer to target. Not for destruction, not for conquest, but for assimilation. A place not to invade, but to merge with, to plant, to alter, to reshape. Some called it hope, the idea that life could be sown across galaxies by intelligences older than we can fathom. But others saw the darker truth. Seeds do not ask permission. They do not negotiate with soil. They take root, they grow, they consume. And what if this wasn't the first time? What if the spark of life on Earth wasn't an accident, but a pattern repeating itself? What if 3 Atlas was not introducing something new, but coming back to harvest what it had already sown? The cosmos no longer looked indifferent. It looked methodical, and Earth perhaps was never ours to begin with. For a brief moment, scientists believed they had charted 3 Atlas completely. Its orbit, its signals, its structure. But then the data betrayed them again. Webb's instruments caught something no natural body should ever display. Self-reconfiguration. The surface of 3 Atlas shifted. Subtle at first, patterns of reflection changing like a machine flexing its skin. Over days, those shifts became undeniable. It was not static. It was adapting, adjusting, preparing, as though every hour in our solar system fed it new data, new insights, new purpose. And then came the worst revelation of all. A secondary signal emerged, lower in frequency, longer in pulse. Not aimed at Earth, but away from us, broadcasting into deep space. A message not for us, but for the void. Speculation fractured into fear. Was it calling reinforcements? Reporting back to something older, larger, hidden? Or was it simply activating the next step in a sequence we were never meant to witness? To many, it no longer mattered what the signal meant. The fact that it existed was enough. This object was no longer just here. It was connected. It was a node, a messenger, a piece of something larger. And the idea that chilled even the boldest minds was this: perhaps we were never the intended audience at all. Perhaps everything, the pulses, the patterns, the chemical whispers, was not for humanity's benefit or warning. Perhaps it was nothing more than a status report, a beacon announcing to the stars: the soil is ready. The silence of space has always been humanity's comfort. But now it had broken, and what answered from that silence might already be on its way. At first, the signs were subtle. A burst of microwave energy over Antarctica, a tremor of ultra-low frequency vibrations rippling through the ice, unlinked to tectonic movement. Then, patterns, synchronizations across Earth's magnetic field, volcanic chambers resonating like struck drums, entire flocks of birds and pods of whales altering course in eerie unison. It was as if the planet itself was responding to a signal older than its own memory. And still, 3 Atlas pulsed. Each emission now felt less like observation and more like command. Not speech, not words, but an execution, lines of code written in the language of the cosmos. Then came the most damning evidence. A transmission not aimed at Earth, but at the moon. Precise, focused. It struck an ancient mass concentration buried beneath the lunar surface, a place long suspected of holding secrets we were never meant to touch. The timing was too perfect to ignore. 3 Atlas was not waiting. It was activating. Desperation turned to silence in mission control. For every answer, a darker question emerged. What was buried on the moon? What was being awakened beneath our oceans, inside our magnetic field, within the very DNA of life itself? And then the final thought, whispered by those who understood patterns too well: what if this object had not entered our solar system at all? What if it had always been here, dormant, hidden, awaiting the day a young civilization grew curious enough to look up with eyes strong enough to see it? If that is true, then we did not discover 3 Atlas. We triggered it. We triggered it. We lit the beacon. And now, the silence of the universe has shattered forever. Something is listening. Something is coming. And we were the ones who called it.